What happens when a quiet black woman asks for a raise and her boss laughs in her face? He had no idea who she was about to call. What happened next turned the entire office upside down. There are Fridays, and then there are Fridays. You know the kind, where the air feels thick enough to slice, where every email sounds like a threat, and where the hum of fluorescent lights above your head starts to feel personal. That was the energy pulsing through the Everline PR office that afternoon. Tension sat in every corner, like it paid rent, but not Monica James. Oh no, she moved through that place like she had her own weather system. Quiet, composed, warm, like she knew how to stay standing when the rest of the building wanted to crumble. While others were counting down the minutes to bolt, Monica was finishing a client report with the kind of precision that would make a surgeon nervous. She was also mentoring the new intern, poor child glued to the copy machine like it was her destiny. That was Monica, 41 years old and still finding the time to help others, even when the system handed her mud with a smile. She didn't do it for praise. She did it because she remembered what it felt like to be unseen, unheard, and underestimated. But that Friday, she'd had enough. Simon Carlyle's office sat in the corner, decked out with leather furniture and a skyline view of Manhattan that he looked at like he built it himself. The man had a globe on his desk that he liked to spin during his vision talks, as if world domination was just another quarter's goal. Simon was the walking, talking embodiment of corporate confidence dipped in performative progressivism. The kind of man who attended one diversity webinar and thought he deserved a parade. Monica stood at his door, straightened her jacket, took a breath that came from somewhere deep in her gut, and knocked. "Come in," he called, his voice smooth and casual, like he was expecting a refill on his espresso. She stepped inside and laid the folder on his desk, neatly, respectfully. He didn't even glance up. "Simon," she said evenly, "I wanted to talk to you about a raise. I've been managing two projects, stepping in to lead during your emergency absences, and for the last 6 months." Simon finally looked up, and then he did the unthinkable. He laughed, not a chuckle, not a nervous smirk, a full-bodied, head-thrown back. "You must be out of your mind," kind of laugh. "A raise," he repeated, wiping the corners of his eyes like she'd told a joke. "Monica, come on. You're good. Within the expectations, of course. But a raise in this budget? For you?" He leaned forward like he was about to whisper insider truth. "You understand, right? You're here because of our commitment to diversity. It doesn't mean you're not qualified. It just means, let's be honest, we were being socially responsible." That was the moment. That's when something inside Monica didn't just shift. It snapped clean in two. But she didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her face was calm as a Chicago January. Behind her, the office watched through glass like it was a theater show. Some leaned in. Others pretended to type. Not a single soul stepped up. She reached into her pocket as her phone buzzed, glanced at the screen, then lifted it slowly to her ear. "Excuse me, I need to take this," she said coolly, locking eyes with him. Then into the phone. "Yes, Mr. President." The silence was volcanic. Simon's expression crumbled mid-smirk. His mouth hung open like someone had just deleted his bank account. The glass office walls might as well have been made of ice, frozen in disbelief. "I'm in a meeting," she continued, eyes steady. "I'll call you back in 5 minutes." Simon's face transformed. The arrogance drained away like color from a photo. He stammered, grasping for control. "Monica, did you just say—" "I know what I said," she replied, rising from her seat. "And so do you." And with that, she walked out. The office parted like the Red Sea. Some folks stared like they'd just seen a miracle. Sandra from accounting almost dropped her latte. Someone whispered, "Did she say the president?" Someone else started texting at lightning speed. But Monica didn't walk. She floated, like a woman who had just dropped the match and was watching the fire take root. 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside. Not federal agents, White House staff. Monica, it turned out, had been serving as a behind-the-scenes consultant to a working group on employment discrimination. Quietly, off the books, because real work doesn't need applause. Inside, the atmosphere flipped on its axis. Fear and politeness settled over the office like new carpet. Simon locked himself in his office like the walls could protect him from accountability. An internal email followed. Mandatory ethics training scheduled. Attendance required. Violations will be noted. But for Monica, this was just the beginning. Later that night, Monica sat at her kitchen table with a warm mug of tea and a tired back. Across from her sat her son, Darius, 17, sharp-tongued, with that youthful boldness she recognized from her own reflection. "You really said, Mr. President?" he asked, wide-eyed. She sipped slowly, then smirked. "Exactly like that." He shook his head in awe. What did he do? He reacted like a man who's used to standing on people's backs until he realizes the ground just moved. Darius laughed, proud and stunned. "Mom, you're a legend." She shook her head. "No, baby, I'm just tired. And tired women don't play nice anymore." She went to bed late. Her phone buzzed all night. The story was already spreading. Someone had posted about it. Black woman shuts down racist boss with a single phone call to the president. Memes were multiplying like wildfire. People were sending her messages. Support, praise, disbelief. But Monica didn't smile. Because she knew. This wasn't the finish line. It was the first domino. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, she thought about all the women who'd swallow disrespect just to keep a job, who were told to wait their turn or be grateful to be here, who'd kept quiet not because they lacked courage, but because the rent was due and their kids were hungry. That night she made a decision. If the system wasn't going to change on its own, it was time to burn the blueprint and draft something new. What happened next flipped the entire script. You won't want to miss how this story unfolds, because when one woman stands tall, the system starts to tremble. Monday didn't creep in softly like a lazy weekend morning. No, it came in loud, cold, and scorching, like someone slammed the door on denial and turned up the volume on reality. The coffee was cold, the atmosphere was boiling, and the Everline office buzzed with the low, anxious hum of a hive that sensed the queen was gone, and something bigger, meaner was heading straight for the throne. Nobody knew exactly what was coming, but everybody knew something was. The energy was too charged, too unsettled, like the air right before lightning hits the same spot twice. Nobody could pinpoint the storm's center, except for one woman, Monica James. She walked into that building not like she worked there, but like she owned the floor beneath her feet. Her presence had always been calm, commanding, even when she was overlooked. But today she radiated the kind of authority that made people pause mid-keystroke. She was dressed in a tailored garnet pantsuit that hugged her dignity like armor. No loud colors. No need for that. Her confidence did the talking. Her heels? Modest, steady, like she came to make statements, not noise. Her eyes locked forward, shoulders squared, and the kind of stillness in her chest that only comes when your fear has burned out and all that's left is fire. As she stepped off the elevator, you could almost hear the silence spread. Conversations stuttered. Coffee cups halted midair. A guy in tech actually dropped his mouse. Sandra from accounting visibly choked on her granola bar. Simon Carlyle, the ever-puffed-up king of Everline, peeked his head out of his glass-walled office, looking like a man who just realized the locks on his castle were decorative. His face twisted into a polite grimace, part greeting, part panic. "Monica," he called out, plastering on a grin as fake as the motivational posters he'd hung in the hallway. "Listen, I wanted to say, about Friday." She held up a single hand, a calm, elegant, stop right there kind of gesture. "We'll talk later," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "Right now I have to prep for a call with—" She paused, letting the pause stretch like tension in a drum. "The White House Office of Ethics." Simon swallowed so hard you could hear it echo off the glass. 2 hours later, the doors of Everline's largest conference room opened to reveal a trio that no one expected to see outside a TV drama. Joanna Peters walked in first, Deputy Press Secretary of the United States. Dressed in jet black, with the eyes of someone who'd sat through too many bad faith apologies and had zero tolerance for more. Behind her, 2 agents from the Federal Employment Practices Commission followed silently. One held a tablet. The other had the posture of someone who'd seen the inside of too many corrupted companies to be impressed by another. "Where is Mr. Carlyle?" Joanna asked without smiling. Her tone could freeze lava. The receptionist stammered something about his office. 3 minutes later, the door to Simon's sanctum closed behind the delegation. 10 minutes after that, it opened again, this time with a very different Simon. Gone was the smug posture. Gone was the composed, I'm in control look. In its place stood a pale, perspiring executive with eyes darting like a man realizing his parachute might have been decorative too. By lunchtime, the entire building knew. The ethics committee was launching an official investigation. Simon was under review for workplace discrimination. But that was only the appetizer. While whispers of corporate collapse spread like spilled coffee, Monica sat at her desk, calm, unreadable, and opened an email invitation. National Forum on Social Justice, speaker confirmation, Washington, 3 days from now. She read the subject line twice, then a third time. Most people would have been nervous. Most people would have doubted themselves. But Monica? She just breathed out, slowly, because clarity had finally arrived. Washington, D.C. 3 days later. The room was larger than any she had ever stood in, its ceilings high enough to swallow doubt whole. The lighting was clinical, but the energy, it pulsed with gravity. These weren't interns or office gossips. These were senators, activists, journalists, people who shaped policy, not paperclips. Backstage, Monica stood with her hands on a sheet of notes, her heart steady but present. She heard her mother's voice in her head, soft but resolute. They expect you to stay quiet, baby. Show them what happens when we speak. Her name was announced. Monica James stepped onto the stage. Not a swagger, not a strut, just presence. The lights hit her face, the room held its breath. Good afternoon, she began. Her voice wasn't loud, but it landed heavy. My name is Monica James, and if you'd asked me a month ago who I was, I might have told you. Just a woman trying to hang on. But now I know. I am a woman who will no longer be silent. She let the words settle, and then continued. I'm not here with slogans. I didn't come with polished speeches. I came with truth. I came with facts. I came with the pain of 1,000 days working twice as hard for half the credit. I had the degree, the experience, the results, and when I asked for a raise, my boss laughed, then told me I was only there because of a diversity initiative. Gasps, murmurs. One senator visibly stiffened. My story, she said, eyes sweeping the room. It's not unique. It's routine. For women who look like me, I wasn't asking for favors. I was demanding fairness. And what did I get? Dismissal, disrespect, doubt. She took a step forward. But I had a choice. Swallow it or say it. And I chose to say it because silence is the scaffolding of oppression and words tear it down. The room erupted, first a ripple, then a roar. A standing ovation not out of obligation, but resonance. The kind of applause that doesn't just clap, it connects. After the speech, the press closed in. A CNN correspondent asked, do you really think this moment will lead to change? I don't think, Monica replied. I know, because we're finally calling things by their name. And once you name injustice, it can't hide. That night back home, she opened her laptop, sat for a long while staring at the file on her desktop. Resignation letter. Her finger hovered. Then she closed the lid. Leaving would have been easy. Too easy. But Monica wasn't in the business of easy anymore. She stayed, because unfinished business doesn't end. It evolves. Simon sat in his now empty office. No assistant, no control, just a fading sense of entitlement and a long wait for the board's final verdict. His window looked out over the same city skyline, but it felt farther away than ever, like the kingdom he thought he owned had been reclaimed by truth. And Monica? The next morning, her inbox lit up with an internal email. Subject, New Leadership Initiative Proposal. It came from the vice president of the company. It began with an apology and ended with an offer to lead a company-wide reform initiative focused on ethics, inclusivity, and justice. She read it slowly, thought for a moment, then smiled. Now, she said aloud, we begin. This is the climax, everything you've waited for, right here. But you haven't seen the finish line yet. Stay tuned, because Monica James is just getting started. Monday didn't come in gentle. It didn't knock. It didn't whisper. It stormed into Everline like a courtroom gavel slamming on polished mahogany, sharp, decisive, and echoing. The fluorescent lights in the office felt colder than usual, and for once, it wasn't just the AC. There was a chill in the air, a change. a reckoning. Monica James sat quietly in the largest conference room at Everline, a place where, in the past, executives gathered to nibble on dry crackers and toss around meaningless buzzwords like synergy and alignment, while avoiding accountability like it was contagious. But today, there were no crackers, no water bottles with corporate logos, just a long oak table, thick with tension and power. At the far end of the table sat the board of directors, 8 men and 2 women who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Their suits were pressed, their eyes were tired. These were people who spent more time reading earnings reports than listening to people with names they couldn't pronounce on the first try. Across from Monica sat Simon Carlyle. He wasn't wearing a tie, his shirt collar was loose, and the confident glint he usually wore like aftershave was gone. His eyes were ringed with fatigue. His fingers fidgeted with a pen, as if hoping it could write him out of this mess. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Ms. James," she said, her voice clipped but neutral, "you've submitted a formal claim of systematic discrimination within this company, specifically citing Mr. Carlyle. Would you care to elaborate on the basis of your accusation?" Monica didn't flinch. She raised her eyes, locking onto the chairwoman with a gaze that didn't beg. It demanded. Her voice, steady and crystal clear, sliced through the silence like a verdict. "I'm not making accusations," she said calmly. "I'm presenting proof, documented patterns, internal communication, promotion records, salary comparisons, names." She paused, pulling out a folder and setting it on the table with precision. "That's a list of qualified women, particularly black women, who were passed over for promotions over the last 3 years, despite outperforming their white male counterparts in every measurable category. In that folder is also a transcript of an internal message from Mr. Carlyle stating, and I quote, 'She's too ambitious. Don't give her a raise. She'll start asking for more.'" The tension in the room was now a living thing. Eyes shifted, throats cleared. Someone scribbled in a notebook, though it was probably just nervous doodling. Simon sat up. That's being taken out of context," he stammered. Monica turned her head slowly. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Context," she said, "is the entire culture that allowed you to believe that message was acceptable in the first place. The context is my entire career here, Simon, and you were its architect." That was it. No theatrics. No need to shout. Truth doesn't always need a microphone. Sometimes it just needs a woman with nothing left to lose. 48 hours later, an internal memo confirmed what everyone in the office had already whispered. Simon Carlyle was leaving voluntarily, a clean phrase meant to protect face. But everyone knew the truth. He was fired, and that should have been the end. But for Monica James, it was only a door. A week after his departure, Monica opened her inbox to find a message stamped confidential. It came from a .gov address. The subject line read, "Invitation Federal Advisory Committee on Workplace Equity." It was from the White House, and no, not a photo op or ceremonial handshake. This was an invitation to sit on a policy team drafting legislation, real legislation, aimed at overhauling the way corporate America handles internal discrimination, with a focus on large institutions and systemic bias. The name of the bill? The Equal Floor Act. It was poetic. 3 weeks later, Monica walked into a boardroom in the Eisenhower Executive Office building, a space thick with history and decisions that shaped the country. She wasn't wearing her nerves. She wore purpose. A deep navy suit, gold hoop earrings that matched the confidence in her voice. No notes, no bluff. She looked around the room. Department heads, senators, corporate legal advisors. "I've heard people say the system is broken," she said, opening the meeting. "But that's the wrong diagnosis. This system isn't broken. It was designed this way, designed to place certain people on top and others on the floor, not because they lack skill or drive, but because the game was rigged before they walked through the door." No one interrupted her, because when Monica James spoke now, rooms listened. Back at Everline, change was no longer hypothetical. HR wasn't just emailing out policies no one read. They were rewriting them. Apology emails started circulating. Former colleagues of Monica, women she had trained, shielded, advocated for, began getting callbacks, promotions, salary adjustments. Some people called it a cleanup. Monica called it the bare minimum. Then came another message, this time from Everline's new leadership. An offer. Vice President of Internal Policy and Ethics. The same company that once laughed at her request for a raise now wanted her to reshape their values from the inside. At first, she wanted to decline, but then she glanced at the framed photo on her desk. Her son Darius, in his graduation cap, his eyes full of hope. She thought about the girls in internships, the women in junior roles, the black employees who still walked into meetings unsure if they'd be heard. Leaving would have let the company breathe easy. Staying meant keeping the air thin until real change became the new normal. She accepted. Her first day as VP was, in a word, poetic. She stepped into what used to be Simon's office. Same window, same view. But the seat of power? That was different now. She sat in the leather chair, spun once, then opened the first file on her desk. Compensation audits, employee evaluations, discrimination claims. And in the data, Monica found exactly what she'd suspected all along. A corporate pattern loud enough to echo. She didn't cry. She didn't gloat. She opened a new document, titled it Reform Plan Phase 1, and started typing. Week 1, Anonymous Feedback Portal. Week 2, Equity Review Panels. Week 4, Mandatory Cultural Literacy Training. Not the checkbox kind. Real talk. Real change. And then came the all-staff meeting. For the first time, Monica stood in front of the entire Everline team. Not as a colleague, not as a case study, but as a leader. If you ever feel invisible in this place, she said, I've been there. If you feel like your voice disappears in the air, I've felt that too. This office is changing, not because it's trending, but because silence is no longer acceptable currency. 3 months later, she returned to Washington, this time as a guest of honor at a White House reception celebrating the launch of the Equal Floor Act. The president shook her hand. You didn't just transform a company, he said. You helped shift a conversation across the country. Monica smiled, gracious but firm. I didn't do it for transformation, she replied. I did it because I was tired, and sometimes tired women change the world. The final scene of this story wasn't in an office, or even in Washington. It was in an old college auditorium. Monica had been invited to speak to a room full of black college women, future leaders, future fighters, the ones who would take her torch and carry it farther. She stepped up to the mic, looked out over the crowd of young, bright eyes, and saw versions of herself in every row. To be a black woman in corporate America, she began, is like dancing on hot coals and being told to smile while you do it. But if there's one thing I'll leave you with, it's this. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own. And if they tell you to be grateful for what you've got, look them dead in the eye and say, I'm grateful to me for surviving, for pushing through, for not breaking, period. The applause wasn't just loud, it was felt, in the walls, in the floors, in the bones. Monica stood tall, not for validation, but for testimony. Because this was only the beginning. And just like that, what started as humiliation became a national awakening. One woman's courage rewrote the rules. And now generations are listening.